Welcome everyone to the Harvard Association of Law and Business, there we go, legal tech panel, and specifically the Harvard Law and Entrepreneurship Project panel on legal technology and modern corporations. We have a lot of great panelists today here to talk about the different ways that they use and interact with technology, specifically in the legal departments in in-house corporations, and in some cases how they've developed their own very innovative new technology for use in in-house legal departments. So I'm just going to let everyone get started, give a brief introduction for themselves, what they do right now, and sort of a quick intro to the career path that got them there, because as law students, what are we really interested in? How do we become these eminent people? And then we'll go from there. So Jerry, you want to kick this off?
Yeah, so my career path is confusing because I went here and I graduated really recently, but I was a 1L when I realized I liked the law, but I don't know if I wanted to be a law firm, a lawyer. And so my first summer I worked at BCG, second summer I worked at Credit Suisse. I tried consulting and banking. In the meantime, I was building my company in the Harvard Innovation Lab, and got funding my third year here. And so here I am.
Good. I'm Brad Gordon. I am a Senior Vice President, General Counsel, and Secretary for Gilbane Building Company, which is a large construction company based in Providence, Rhode Island, but we operate globally. And my career path kind of ended up in construction. Didn't start that way. I started at a law firm in Washington, D.C., doing kind of big case corporate litigation. That law firm is now gone, merged up with another firm that's now gone. And then that firm has split up. That happens. So I was down there for about 5 years, and then met my wife, moved up to Massachusetts in the mid to late 90s, and went to a firm in the Boston area that represented a lot of towns and municipalities, school districts, all kinds of different agencies in the municipal setting, and they were all doing a lot of building, and they didn't really have somebody who did construction law for them. So the partner came to my office and said, hey, we're doing a lot of construction for our clients, a lot of construction related stuff. We don't have somebody to do that, and you're it. And so I didn't know anything about construction law at the time, but I learned quickly. And ended up doing that for about 4 years, and then went in-house at an engineering construction company that was based over here in Cambridge at Kennel Square, has moved into Boston but operated globally also. Stayed in-house there for 4 years, and then in 2004 joined Gilbane Building Company and been general counsel there since then.
So I'm Jim Cobery. I'm general counsel of the Craft Group. Craft Group is the holding company for all of the various interests that the Craft family has in paper, pulp, sports, and entertainment. So among other things, I'm the general counsel of the New England Patriots. I've been there for 23 years. Prior to joining the Craft Group, I was an associate at Bingham, Dana & Gould, a law firm that no longer exists. It's a common theme there. Prior to that, I was a systems analyst at Campbell Soup Company down in beautiful Campbell, New Jersey. And I mention that because it's come in handy over the last few years in terms of my ability to integrate some technology into our practice. We're a large, international, highly diversified company. At one point, I had 10 lawyers working for me. Now we're down to 4 full-time lawyers and 1 part-time lawyer. And I'll explain to you a little bit later how technology has not only enabled that, but encouraged that.
Hi, I'm Paul James. I'm the Senior Vice President of Risk Management and General Counsel of BondBrothers. We're a 112-year-old family-owned construction company based here in Boston with offices up and down the Northeast corridor. We work in the Northeast United States. I have nothing as cool as a general counsel. That's a tough act to follow. I was with a law firm for 26 years. It still exists, Holland and Knight. Hopefully someone will venture over and take a look. I, like Brad, came to construction law a little bit by circumstances. I joined my law firm after my summer associate experience and was asked to work on a construction case actually as a summer associate. I didn't know anything about it, and I'm sure many of you will find this as you start your careers. I really didn't know what the subject matter was all about, but I found the industry very intriguing. It's an industry based on contacts and contracts and risk allocation that is fascinating and never ends and multi-level. So I decided to venture down that path. I did a lot of intellectual property work for a number of years in the law firm, and each of my clients are mutually horrified about what I did when I wasn't with them, so I decided to gravitate to construction. Really, the story behind that is I started landing clients, and a lot of times your opportunities really, kind of pull you forward. And because I had some experience and some contacts, I started developing a client base as a young associate, and that really led me to a path of running a construction practice at a big law firm for a long time. Like many lawyers, I developed a very close relationship with a number of clients and was acting as an outside general counsel probably to 8 or 9 construction firms based in the Northeast US. And my largest client was pretty sick of paying my bills, and we decided it would be best if I came in and joined their executive team. So it's been a wonderful experience for an old sort of law dog for me to make a transition after 26 years in big law. It's been a lot of fun. I am solely in-house. I am the only lawyer in-house. I was the first lawyer to go in-house to at that point, 108-year-old company. So I rely very much on leveraging technology and leveraging the skills and circumstantial sort of capabilities of my colleagues. And I run a lot of sort of business-related interests on top of my legal interests. So this is a fascinating topic, and I'm sort of the local small guy today. That's my role.
My name is Bill Tsingos. I'm the General Counsel of Toptal, which is one of the world's largest fully distributed companies. We have no offices anywhere. We all work remotely. We are an online, proprietary, and curated freelance talent marketplace. I'm a proud son of Greek immigrants. I was a class of '96 here at the law school. I came to the law school after having deferred my admission for a few years. I was fortunate enough to study at Oxford on a Rhodes doing master's and PhD work, and decided I was going to go back to some of my prior professors. While I was a student in law school, I was actually on the faculty here at Harvard as well, and had to make a decision. Do I teach or do I practice law? I will confess right now, my 3 years of law school were great, but not because of, but in spite of the law school. I thought to myself, oh my God, what am I getting into? And much to my pleasant surprise, the practice of law was much more enjoyable to me from the jump than being a law student. And I thought I could always go back to teaching rather than trying to reverse that order. I clerked for 1 year in the First Circuit with Judge Stahl, and I went to Hale and Dorr, which is still in existence, but it's been merged and it's now part of WilmerHale. After about 5 years and making junior partner, I got poached by another firm in town to head up their SEC Public Company Practice Group. I thought I'd be a bigger fish in a smaller pond, and after 5 years there, I made the jump in-house. 8 years as general counsel of Plymouth Rock Assurance, a locally prominent insurance company. Decided I wanted to go back towards the public company SEC work once it became clear that Plymouth Rock may no longer have that desire to go public because of Sarbanes-Oxley and some of the other things that have happened at Dodd-Frank. I don't blame them. I accepted a job with a former client of Hale and Dorr's Bottom Line Technology, which is based in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. I live in Needham. That was about 150 miles round trip every day. About 4 hours of windshield time, and I was complaining about that one day over coffee at Pete's in Wellesley with one of my former law clerks, and he said, hey, there's this company called Toptal that's looking for a general counsel, and it says you can work remotely from home. And I said, what? That doesn't. And he goes, no, I think it's legit. So I did the research, and I happily traded my 4 hours in the car. Great, bottom line, great company, but it was just not working in my life. And talking about law and technology, I could not even think about the company or the role that I do now without what technology has enabled. So when I graduated in '96, if you told me that this company or this job could exist, it would not. So.
Thank you all so much. I was very excited to hear those stories and admitted the fact that these people are sharing their personal views. What they say does not reflect the views of their employers, past or present. You can tell I'm not a lawyer yet. So I guess we'll try and have everyone answer everything that they feel compelled to speak, but Jim, I wanted to start with you. Talking about, you mentioned that your team has slimmed down a bit with the use of legal technology, and I wanted to start with, over the course of your various in-house careers, what's the biggest impact that legal tech has had for you, for how you do business?
So before 2001, Patriots were a somewhat sleepy organization. In a typical year, we would do somewhere in the neighborhood of 250 to 300 sponsorship deals. And we had a team of lawyers, not a large team at that time, that would handle those. It was relatively easy to do. And then some of you may know that 2001 was a somewhat magical season. We built Gillette Stadium, which gave us a lot more inventory, and we won the Super Bowl. And overnight, we went from that sleepy existence to the exact opposite. We suddenly started doing somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,800 to 2,000 sponsorship deals. And I had to hire a whole bunch of people, and we jokingly used to refer to it as the Harry Potter sorting hat, because the sponsorship deals would come to me and I'd say, oh. And no one had any idea, no one had any expertise. It was really just a fire drill, and try to get things done. It was not terribly sustainable. There was no good quality control to it. It really was not a good way to run a department. And so I started looking for ways to establish some order and get some consistency and some quality control. And we came up with a database that we allowed our marketing folks and our finance folks to participate in. And we connected that to a contract generation software, document generation software. And so that allowed us to take most of the contracts, 1,800 to 2,000, probably 85 to 90% of them we were able to generate through this document generation software, move it all the way through the process with very little involvement, very little negotiations. And that allowed us to focus on the remaining 10 to 15%, which were the more complicated, usually the more valuable deals. And so if you think about it, sleepy environment, tremendous change, lots of expansion of people, chaos, and then technology allowed us to take that and restore it back down to an organized, less intensive format. So that's probably the biggest impact that technology has had in my early part of my in-house career. Lately, I've been looking at e-billing software and participating in enterprises that allow us to compare the relative efficiency of lawyers and law firms for different clients. And so now I have a much smaller department. I rely a lot more upon outside counsel, but I finally have the tools, electronic tools, that allow me to determine which counsel should get which assignment and to keep track of them and make sure they're doing it in a productive, efficient, good quality manner. And that's allowed me to really leverage the external law firms.
Well, as I indicated, technology is the only thing that really enables Toptal to operate, and by extension the legal department to operate in the mode that it is. So if you think about it, there's no office. So it's collaboration tools ranging from Zoom and Skype, principally more Zoom now, Slack, emails, Google Docs, that enable the collaboration of people from different locales. So at any given point in time, I'll give you an example this morning, and part of the reason I was running late is I was dealing with simultaneously making edits in a collaborative setting with people logging in. We're all like doing a share screen with a document, Google Doc, in real time. And how should it be worded from the marketing perspective? What about the legal perspective? And I mean, this is all, instead of like getting people together in one room, you're all spread across literally the globe. What that does is it allows us to unleash the potential that we have to meet the client demands, no matter where they are. So we can have people on the staff that are specialized in a particular market area, or have either geographic or vertical. And it allows people to be productive without losing, let's say, in my particular instance, and this is my case is not an edge case, unfortunately, in industrial Western economies, the commute times, right? So take that 3 or 4 hours of commute time and you devote it to more work and or happier, healthy lifestyle, hopefully. And the result is you can collaborate more productively. In terms of things like using tools to leverage things, a similar thing where we have pre-populated or close to pre-populated templates on some of the standard contracts. So at any given point in time, we have multiple thousands of engagements. Those are all for the most part, generated templates with some edited, playbook items of, hey, if someone wants to do point A, B, or C, you empower the people to be able to do that, and then if it's something higher up, it can bubble up. And again, that unleashes a lot of productivity. In terms of the change, so I mentioned I graduated in '96, and I was a summer associate before that. I mean, the work that needed 3 or 4, or sometimes even 5 people to generate, let's say, a document, a 60 or 70 page document with red lines, and make the FedEx deadline and so forth, I could pretty much do that, single-handedly. That's all been enabled by the changes in technology. And when you're talking about worker productivity and so forth, that is unleashing. The other thing that I'll mention briefly is there's a lag between what the technology enables, what the adoption of the technology is, and then finally the law catching up to the changes in human behavior caused by the enablement of the technology. So it's sort of like a domino effect. And we can maybe talk about that in a little bit.
Paul, I wanted to ask, coming from 26 years in big law to an in-house environment, what are, from your perspective, some of the biggest challenges that you faced on the in-house side, and where do you see technology helping or the lack of technology hurting?
It's a great question, and one of my good friends from a law firm went in-house to a larger company that I currently at now, which means he had resources, so his pain wasn't near as bad as he thought. And he waited about 3 weeks, and he called me at like 7:45 on a Wednesday morning, and he said, "How do you like life drinking out of a fire hose 24 hours a day?" There's really no other way to describe it. I came from a big law firm. I ran a pretty good-sized group. I had resources, associates, paralegals. I had pretty much a dedicated secretary, and I went from that. I don't have a secretary. So I, by definition, had to leverage all of the available tools, both sort of human tools and technology tools, in order to sustain what I was doing for the client, which became my employer. So it was a very radical shift from really learning how to be very resourceful and very discriminating about what I spent time on. When I was a law firm partner, I could find a problem with anything. And I could work that problem as long as the client would tolerate it. I literally these days have completely realigned my thinking around what's big, what's important, what's the core values of our business, where are the biggest pockets of risk that we need to control and allocate and manage. And that's where I try to spend as much time as possible. To say that you could get lost in the weeds in any business, I think is very true, but construction literally is an industry of weeds. And we have many people who get lost and never found again because they don't understand the larger picture. So I struggle to try to pull people out of the weeds to manage things. So I try to deal with things on a very leveraged efficiency basis as best I can. I have people work for me who aren't lawyers, so I've trained people to think a little bit like lawyers, which is really a fascinating experience, as you'll see as you go into diverse businesses. People just don't think like we do, quite frankly. And it takes some time and some effort, but I think it can happen. I went from someone, a senior legal secretary in a law firm, especially a big law firm, is an amazing, amazing resource. They really operate in many respects like young associates and paralegals. And so I lost that, so I had to replicate that. So I try to kind of, bring along the resources I have available to me as best I can. Speaking of collaboration, so I just did a 2-hour conference call under a leafy tree in my car in Mount Auburn Street with 8 people on the call, all with active documents, all through the Wi-Fi in my car, with my laptop on one side and my iPad on the other, and that's my office. I wasn't missing anything. I had everything I needed. I could see and speak and touch and edit everything I needed to do. And so that's another way that I try to leverage. I don't need to be everywhere. I can't be everywhere. We operate, we're nowhere near as large as Gilbane, but I'm in-house alone, and we operate in a 12-state region, and I support our business across all those regions. So the leverage the collaboration tools is huge. It's very, very powerful, and it really helps me leverage things. I also, I'm the company librarian. That's one thing you inherit when you come into the company, and I'm responsible, and we're an intensely document-heavy industry with an intense focus on contracts, right, and arrangements and transaction kind of behaviors. So I maintain the company's library of all of our agreements, of all of our forms and procedures, and we use SharePoint. There's many collaboration tools available. It's a very powerful tool. It's an access anytime, anywhere, any platform kind of thing. And that really helps with file sharing, with organization, and my ability to be able to touch our systems and our documents and procedures wherever possible. The one thing that's lagging, there are many things lagging, but one of the things that's lagging in my world is I'm very reliant on others to prepare something for me to analyze. Because I could be lost and no one would ever find me again if I looked at every word in every agreement every hour of every day, right? So I've developed these sort of templates and procedures where people, hopefully, who are responsible, and one of the other things I'll mention is, especially when you have a small in-house legal presence, you spend a lot of time training and mentoring and sort of guiding. So I spend a disproportionate probably amount of time trying to get the troops tuned into what's important and having them profile for me the major issues in our agreements as an example. So the notion that Jerry and his colleagues in his emerging industry can, sort of accelerate the ability to profile and prioritize document review, contract review, transactional details is extraordinarily powerful. I'm interested to hear, especially with an industry such as ours, which is tremendously unique. Terms, definitions, concepts are really embedded almost exclusively to our industry, and they don't cross very much. Having been a former IP lawyer, there really is very little translation other than very smart organizational, sort of structure and that sort of thing. So it's definitely a work in progress. I think you have to just understand that there's a certain level that you have to reach, a comfort level that's a little bit different from when you're very much an issue-focused outside counsel. That makes sense.
Jerry, I think that is a segue to you. Having talked to in-house legal departments at a variety of different companies, shall we say, what do you think are some of the standard problems that you've seen that they've expressed and that you're working to address?
Yeah, I've spoken I think maybe over 5,000 general counsel over the last 2 years. And what's interesting when I was listening to you talk about the suite of solutions you have is a lot of those solutions are available to other departments. If you're looking at collaboration tools like Gmail and things like that, SharePoint, a lot of that's coming through finance. Those decisions were bought even before legal departments were in those companies. One thing that when I was at HOS as a 1L, I thought, what about us? What is the Salesforce for lawyers? Salesforce for salespeople, what is that for us? And a lot of the times the document management systems that we see are built for finance or built for ops. So if you think about SharePoint, it has a bunch of folders. Any of you work in law firms, you either use iManage or you use a local network drive, especially in banking. And it's just folders on folders, scan PDFs, and then tribal knowledge. Somebody's been here for 25 years, they know that supplier, and so those are the terms that we usually have. What is a way to use artificial intelligence to take that tribal knowledge and make it available for even non-lawyers so that they know when to call lawyers, when can they execute an NDA. That really is just a template.
So Brad, I'd love to hear about your perspective on in-house legal tech and also some of the other interesting uses of technology you mentioned, not necessarily directly in the legal department, but that the legal departments had to work with.
Well, a lot of what Paul said applies to my company as well, maybe on a larger scale. And we do have a larger department. We have 7 lawyers, including me. But for the size of our company and the reach of our projects and the size of those projects, 7 lawyers is really pretty small, and relative to some of our competitors, it's a pretty small department. So we have to leverage the few people we have to do a whole lot of work with a lot of risk. And as Paul said, these projects have contracts, and going back to contracts is a common theme, because that's really where we're finding a lot of the uses of technology are most beneficial. These contracts, and we have projects that range from anywhere $200,000 to $2 billion. Very large projects, very small projects, and so there's a lot of volume. And these are almost always manuscript contracts. There are some standard forms, but they're often modified for particular projects. So in essence, we do have to read every contract carefully, because one change of one word can affect the risk allocation for a project that could have a couple $1 billion at risk. So if there are certain things that are recurring, and if there was an AI tool that we could use to go through that first, to do a first cut, I think that would be very beneficial. When I came to Gilbane in 2004, there were only 2 lawyers. I was one of the 2, and it was just very difficult to go through what had already become a very large volume of contracts. And And so we had to put a process in place because there wasn't one. People would email a contract to my colleague, and she would review it and email the comments back. And it was very inefficient. She would have to get on the phone and call and ask, you know, tell me about the job, what are the risks on the project, have we worked with this owner, how's it financed, all those things that you have to know to really evaluate what the risks are. Because if you look at the contract static on the table without knowing the details of that project, it's meaningless. So we put a paper process that people could email a form, I think much like what you were saying, Paul, laying out a lot of the key details about the project as a starting point for the attorney. But that was a paper process. We eventually put in a fairly rudimentary electronic workflow, because it does have to go to the lawyers, it has to go to our insurance department, it has to go to the finance group, it has to go to the operations folks, and it has to, you know, get sign-offs on it by all of them, so that you need an orderly workflow to make sure that happens in the most efficient way and get it done. So we put a rudimentary system in place, and that had a lot of limitations, but it was a lot better than what we had before. So we evolved, and November 19th, which is a week from Monday, we're putting a new system in place, which, you know, the old system, you know, the way that lawyers negotiate contracts, they'll redline a document, and they'll send the comments over, and you can accept them, you can reject them, you can edit it, you know, that kind of thing. And the old system did not really facilitate that, and this one really allows for the lawyers to work the way they need to work within a workflow that tracks it, keeps statistics, and keeps a definitions library. You know, where's a contract that uses a particular term? Well, we can go search for that now. And so there's an AI piece, I guess, in there. I do want to talk when we talk about new developments and exciting about AI and some other things, but that's really been the biggest technology boost for the way our department works. The one big letdown, and we may have the same experiences, has been e-discovery, which is the other main technology tool that just absolutely sucks. I mean, we've had so little success with using that in an accurate way to generate among all of the thousands and thousands of different types of documents we have in so many different locations across projects that go from Asia to Europe to back to the United States. We just have not had success to the point where we almost abandoned what we were using to go back and doing things manually. So if you want to fix something, Jerry, next you should start looking at that. There is a lot of predictive coding and other things used, AI tools in e-discovery, not in the software we were using. I think it was doing the reverse for us. So that's been a real challenge for us.
You led right into the next question. What are some of the most exciting discoveries you've seen in legal tech? Or really, yeah, absolutely. You seem excited.
Well, yeah, the most exciting thing, and it's really generated from the construction projects, but we're utilizing it, we're starting to utilize it for legal purposes, is we have big projects, and you could have at any one time on some of the largest projects, a couple of thousand people working on a project site at one time in all kinds of areas, little pockets here, little pockets there, or just spread across. And so we started using a wearable technology that each trade worker puts on their body, clips it to like a pager almost, that tracks their look. First it tracks when they come to the job site. We know who they are. We know when they leave the job site. It's a network that's set up for the project. It's non-GPS, so it doesn't track them if they leave the job site. And it allows us to know, first of all, if somebody's injured, they can just press a button and then the safety responder can go right to the spot where they are and get to them much more quickly rather than looking for them in the back stairwell of some remote corner of the project. It can also tell us, for purposes of claims and other things, for example, it has a fall detection aspect. It has an accelerometer. So if somebody jumps down from that level to that level, it detects it, or falls down, it detects it so the safety responders can go and see if they're okay. It also has helped us root out some bad behaviors where people were jumping down from scaffolding in a way that could have led to an injury if they weren't corrected, and we were able to address that with some instruction. But in claims, first of all, we're able to look at, you know, for example, we have claims sometimes about productivity where one subcontractor on the project says they were impacted because they couldn't get to an area of the project for work, and they had been delayed on that, and they're due a bunch of money. So we look at this the software that takes the information about who's where on the project, and we see, well, you only had 4 people on the job site that day, and you could have been working in all these other areas, and so your productivity really was not impacted by all these other subcontractors because you didn't have enough people on site. Or we can see, with a heat map where people are working. We can see all kinds of things, and the data collection that we get can be used on that project. We can look at trends for productivity, for a number of other things, and we can aggregate that with other projects to get really good data-driven decision-making tools that help us with risk management, safety, really claims analysis, and a number of other things. So that's the insight.
We focus quite a bit on the corporate side of things. I wanted to pivot, from a prior experience. I mentioned I was at an insurance company for 8 years. So a lot of these same tools can be enabled, especially when you have multiple iterations of the same thing on the litigation or claims handling side. So let's say you're going to be configured to be defending several hundred cases in a jurisdiction or several thousand cases in a jurisdiction. You customize your litigators electronic folder, so it's like a completely paperless or close to paperless office. Something comes in, everything is docketed, the whole procedural case flow. You get in questions to interrogatories, boom, there's the template, your response. Already pretty much ready to be customized with tickler systems, like this is now due at the court. It's almost, I think you could take my 13-year-old and plug him in and probably, defend a auto or home tort case in Massachusetts or New Jersey, the way that most of these cases are configured. Then on top of that, you layer in some of this AI type stuff where you're reviewing the medical bills that come in, usual and customary, is the chiropractor part of a ring that's, charging exorbitant things. Then you have the data analytics to connect all the dots to detect the fraud rings that are going in. On the insurance side, that's a huge business, and it really allows 1 or 2 people to do the work that, let's say you had 100 people, again, these aren't actual numbers, but it's on that order of magnitude. You're able to just churn through so much data and clue you in. It doesn't take the human element out of it, but I think consistent to what we've heard other panels say, it then allows you to bring the human element to focus in on what's going on. The other thing that's a huge change from, personally, I remember going in, coming right out of Harvard Law School, was like, running to get the red lines on the deal documents by the FedEx deadline to get to everyone. Now we can all do that through emails. And it took a while for some of the young guns to persuade the senior partners that, yeah, this is okay. And then we had to make sure that the emails were encrypted and all this stuff. The same kind of early adoption is still happening now, by the way. So the millennials coming to me, telling me, hey, we can do this through Slack. I'm like, all right, show me how. The other thing is the due diligence rooms, similar to e-discovery. We used to be chartered off, fly to some remote Midwestern town for 2 weeks and look at all their contracts, right? And just like you're sitting there and you're reviewing the contract, the termination, the assignment, what contracts need to be assigned, now it's like you upload it and people can just be working much more productively without incurring the disruption of relocating people, and then maybe you miss something in the data room. My notes aren't there. Do we send someone back all the way to College Station, Pennsylvania to review this one document? No, if you're in the digital data room, you just go in and log on at 11 o'clock at night and look at it again. That's the other thing that's again, it's just unlocking the productivity to allow you to do what you can more productively, and hopefully do things that are more interesting rather than being stuck flying on little turboprop planes or whatever.
If I can jump on that.
Yeah.
I think in your generation, it's the
Did you
location.
get that origin? It only took 40 minutes for that.
That's all right. I still go
If
to
you talk about
La Flamme.
millennials, I'm a millennial. So
I still go to La Flamme Barber Shop, so whatever. My kids are saying, I'm going to get you Grecian formula for Christmas this year. So yeah, this is like, thank you for like singing yes. You heard that.
As a millennial who uses Slack in my startup, when you said that makes sense. I think 20 years ago, the problem was, where are these documents? Are they sitting in different areas? And then we went to the cloud. And going to the cloud was sort of a scary thing.
Yep.
Is it secure? Are there going to be hackers? I think cloud is now very widely used in data rooms. But what if I told you that instead of having to read every document, you can get a dashboard? And so there are, out of 100 documents, 40 are MSAs, 30 are NDAs, the rest are subscription agreements, leases, loans. Break it down, put the right associates in the right teams, and then you can say, I want to see only contracts that have change of control provisions that are still active.
Yep.
And then that goes into a different folder. I think that's our generation.
Yeah,
Using
absolutely.
the e-discovery type of technology, better, not the one that you used, but real coding on those documents. I think that's what we're going to see a lot of, because you've done the legwork, you've built the infrastructure around it.
So now that I'm mercifully free from the billable hour and law firm pressures, I think your generation is going to have a fascinating time educating the world on a better, more efficient, more powerful way to leverage the technologies, which runs completely the opposite to how law firms are capitalized and their financial incentives. And I'm sure those who run very large legal departments struggle with this all the time, because everything you just said saves time. It makes it powerfully efficient and far more effective, but it saves a lot of time. And until law firms figure out a way to get away from the time paradigm, and a lot of it is based on the unpredictability of certain elements of law, like litigation, which I did quite a lot of over the years. So I think you're going to have, the technology is going to accelerate at an incredible pace, and it'll be very interesting to see whether service providers can change their financial paradigm to match it. It is not the case. I can tell you at my old law firm, it is rare, except for those who do maybe lots of IP work and deal with lots of startups and entrepreneurs. They're still locked into the traditional sort of billing paradigm that's time-based, and that's going to be, it's the magic sort of elixir for us, but it presents a challenge to those who essentially charge based on their effort and time.
Sounds like my career path is going down the drain.
I just
Law firms aren't going to change anytime soon.
I'll mention one thing that's so simple, and it's been in effect for a long time, that has changed really revolutionary way, the way that a lot of transactions are done, the electronic signature. Just being able to do that rather than having to send around by courier or FedEx or everything else a bunch of documents.
It was hard to pull that document out of their hands though, right? Their grip was so tight. Like, no, really, it's okay. It's just a picture of your signature.
You're in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Some of you may be from here, and my company has done a lot of work for the Commonwealth. And up until, I would say, maybe only 5 years ago, for every contract, they would have a signing ceremony. And fortunately, I live in Massachusetts, so I could just go down to their offices. But someone who, an Asian company or a California company came to do a project in Massachusetts, they would have to fly their executives over to sign that document in the offices of the Division of Capital Asset Management, which is insane. So now, and we can do it with, I'm the corporate secretary, so I can affix the corporate seal electronically now with all of the protection of an electronic signature. These kinds of things are revolutionary. Even though they seem so mundane, they have made a huge difference.
Jim, you mentioned a few points during your career at which you adopted new technologies or things really changed how you did business. And I was wondering, again, people have talked about the legal world's aversion to change, and I was wondering what you think drove the adoption of those new technologies and sort of how you see either in-house counsel or law firms accelerating the use of that. And if you have any fun technologies to throw in we haven't addressed, please do.
I don't have any fun technologies. But for me, one of the most significant changes over the past 5 or 6 years is what Paul is alluding to. We have a greater ability to analyze our legal spend now than we've ever had. And that gives us some degree of power over the law firms that we previously did not have. And so 5 years ago, I generally paid for everything on a time basis, an hourly rate basis. And there were a number of occasions where I would ask for a budget or an estimate of some sort, and they would give me a number, and that number had no relevance whatsoever to what the final price was. None. It was laughable. But now, the combination of technology that allows us to analyze the electronic billing statements over a whole bunch of different cases, and then the sharing of data across a whole bunch of companies so that we have a much larger pool and can have a better understanding of efficiencies and practices. So I've been able to shrink the size of my department, better utilize outside lawyers, and essentially keep the legal spend where it used to be. And I do that because we don't spend nearly as much money on an hourly rate basis now as we formerly did. We spend a lot more money now on a fixed fee basis, both on the transactional side and on the litigation side. And then when we don't have a fixed fee, we have some type of collared or other alternative fee arrangement. And technology is what enables that. You know, without the electronic billing and the related technologies, we could never have done that. And it's been a huge factor. And Paul's absolutely right. Law firms, for a while, were really reluctant to do it. I think one of the benefits of working for the Patriots is that firms want to do business with us and want to be able to put on their client roster that they represent the New England Patriots. And so the quid pro quo is that they bill in the way that I'd like them to bill. And it seems simple, it really does, but it's just this morning. Just this morning, I was talking to one of our outside law firms about their misunderstanding of what I want. And I'm hoping that this year they'll get it right, but no guarantees.
Yeah, the one thing that I do is I review every single bill with my eyes. And I mean, there are two approaches to enforcement, right? There's the Spartacus approach, right? Which is we defeated the army, we're going to crucify the entire army on the Appian Way. You know, unfortunately, you can't be everywhere at the same time. The other approach is sort of like the Wild West. I'm going to string up one malefactor in the interest of town so that the people in the town know that there's a sheriff. So if in my experience, law firm bills, they're a lot of padded. I remember getting one where I had $10,000 for a bill for a summer associate research project for a memo that I didn't ask for to answer a question that I didn't need answered and that I never saw. But once the engagement partner realizes that there's someone actually watching you, and holding them accountable, it's amazing like how those bills all of a sudden start to get trimmed up into shape within a matter of time. Yeah.
So I knew that I was onto something when my old law firm called me in advance and said, listen, you're about to see a bill and you're going to react poorly to this part of it. So technology enabled me to get ahead to the point where they were self-releasing that.
Yeah, and that's what you want to do, on a lot of this stuff. So yeah, I mean, keeping your vendors, and again, that goes beyond that to just all your vendors, right? It's like just look at your own life, right? I mean, if someone's giving you a bill and they're pretty sure that you're going to pay whatever the heck it is, sooner or later the incentives are, okay, I need to raise some money, I'll stick it to the Patriots or Toptal or whatever. But if they know that you're watching and you're going to be, fair with them, you're going to get a fair bill, I think.
The other item I'll suggest here is that I think of us as being in the risk business. As an in-house lawyer, we really want to understand the risks that are inherent in our businesses and try our best to get our business people to understand those and try to structure them out or contract them away. And in many cases, we want to work with them to be proactive. And so in our sports marketing group, our salesmen are incredibly creative folks who like to sell the same general element multiple times. And unless they know we're watching them and have some ability to control them, they do sell the official pizza of the New England Patriots multiple times. And they have done that, actually. But so now we have technologies in place that allow us and the Vice President of Marketing to make sure that those types of things are proactively addressed before they get to the property we stop them. That's a huge benefit to technology.
I'll just mention a quick industry-specific thing that is powerfully leveraged for us. So we work in 12 states. We have hundreds of subcontractor and vendor relationships that I'm ultimately responsible to manage. And we used to do all of that with in-house resources. We're able now, both from a safety and risk control standpoint, as well as a contract and financial compliance standpoint, to use cloud-based platform where all of the vital data is loaded into a cloud-based platform, and we can pull reports across the company, across all projects, and we can feed information in that gets regularly reported out. So where I probably would have needed 4 or 5 people to manage an inventory of vendor relationships that large, I can now do that with like a position and a half. And I think that in construction, but like many industries, the ability to leverage technology to populate data, manage data, and report out data has greatly helped us kind of stay a little bit lean and mean. It's still hard, but it helps.
There are ways it's made it more difficult, though. On our projects, we use all kinds of technology. We have people walking around with tablets, capturing safety information, having plans and specifications right there at their fingertip, collaborating with the architects and the subcontractors, doing building information modeling so they can graphically see, what's underneath the walls and in the ceilings. All of this data, all these data are in a system or in multiple systems all over the place. So as in-house lawyers, when litigation comes up, you've got to be able to locate all of that information, gather all that information, and then produce what's relevant to the particular litigation. Half the time, I don't know what the information is or where it's stored or how to get it. And it could be, multiple people, both inside and outside of the company, that are managing all of those data. And it's very, very challenging. And there really aren't good tools to help just aggregate all of that or to collect it just systematically. And that was going back to the e-discovery software. Yeah, it can go through emails, it can search for names, it can search for terms and do all of that. It can deduplicate, but it can't go out and look at plans and specifications that are out in electronic form somewhere in the cloud or something else that's being used, like the data that's from this wearable technology I'm describing. It's just not there. The software hasn't come that far to be able to do it. Maybe AI can help pull parts together from different areas, but right now it's a huge challenge.
So one of the things that we don't necessarily see on the law school side is the diversity of issues you deal with industry to industry. And so again, from a legal tech perspective, it's relatively easy to build something for a law firm when they're all structured in the same model. And Jerry, I'm curious, and then the rest of you can jump in, how do you approach building software for these in-house counsel who have such a diverse range of needs based on their industry?
Yeah, to solve the problem you're talking about, the e-discovery provider needs to build a model specific to the construction industry. And right now, the way that our AI works is, or any AI works is you get training. And so the stuff that we've done is we got to really get a vendor base that works across any industry. We've got to really get a software licensing agreements that works across any industry. And now we're at a point right now where we can track over 50 different data points on any vendor agreement, regardless of industry. We just did a large project for a Fortune 500 company, size company on that. Now we're building specific applications, loan documents, lease documents, construction documents. Now that you have a general AI model that you can point at specific industries, the tools are going to become better. And you're going to be able to go in and say, I want to use the construction industry model for this type of document, even if it's not a contract, and say pull out the terms. Or in a supply chain context, I want to be able to analyze invoices for offshore vendors that have to comply with GDPR, right? So it's now getting very specific. And even 3 years ago when I started the company, couldn't do that.
So in the future, we'll be able to tell if there's already an official pizza of the New England Patriots.
Yeah, today you can get there by using database structures. In the future, you can use like a robo-lawyer.
Well, I think we're getting towards that time when everybody goes to class. So I want to thank our panel, and if anyone has any questions, now would be the time. Someone has questions.
So thank you, it was a very interesting panel. I wanted to ask you, how do you factor in the infrastructure gap that there are two construction companies, how technology can help bridge that gap? And in particular, how do you see blockchain playing a role in the enforceability of contracts and how that to withstand that kind of progress. How can the lawyers play more proactively in for once?
Well, you know, there are certain aspects of what I understand about blockchain that are utilized in various forms already, from the beginning of procurement of materials and equipment for a project all the way through completion of the project, and having the ability to know the provenance of a piece of equipment or a piece of, you know, here's an example in Boston. There was a failure in the Ted Williams Tunnel where part of the ceiling panels collapsed. It actually killed the driver that was going through there, and it all came down to an anchor bolt. So if you have all of the history of where that anchor bolt started all the way through to when it was installed, who installed it, who was working that day, all of those details, you have a much better ability to defend a claim or prosecute a claim related to that. So I think there are ways to utilize it. It's still, I think, in its infancy, and you know, it's often something that we couldn't do in-house. We would have to have some sophisticated outside law firm. And we do most things in-house except for litigation. We farm that out to outside counsel, and we would look for somebody either who had that capability or knew good consultants. It's often done through consultants, but I think that's probably, I don't know what you guys think.
So there are elements of this in data collection and preservation, and we use a pretty robust cloud-based quality control and data collection tool. So that probably helps once we're responsible. What happened before, oftentimes we take custody and control of an issue, a product, or a system. I think that's very archaic still. But I think those who are ultimately responsible for the end result are now able to figure out from a date and time what happened forward. And we're getting much better at assigning data points and collecting data on literally everything down to the most granular details. And that's relatively easy to do. It becomes quite complex to document what happened beforehand. And even if you have contract obligations, so that all gets disclosed. There's so little sort of systematic approach to this and evenness across products, industries. I still think that's a big challenge, certainly in our business.
So this is my personal views, not those of Toptal, so I just want to be clear about that. We're in the early innings of blockchain specializations. I'm not 100% convinced that this game isn't going to be a washout due to rain. And what do I mean by that? The blockchain and the promise of blockchain is premised on the idea that encryption key factors based on available computing power would take you several 100,000 years to break the code. With the advent of quantum computing, and whether quantum computing gets here this year, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you know, it's all bets are off because you now need maybe 10, 15 minutes to crack the encryption code. So what was supposed to be so impregnable and secure, you know, a couple of years from now, anyone can crack your code in 10 or 15 minutes. I'm not so sure now, I'm sure there's going to be an evolving cat and mouse game where you can create a blockchain that will then in turn defeat quantum computing. But you know, in many of these areas, there's a element of uncertainty of what future technological developments will hold.
We're using blockchain now for tickets. In the not too distant past, we had very serious counterfeiting issues, and so we're working with a lot of the major ticketing organizations to use blockchain to greatly minimize that, and we think that holds a lot of promise. The other area that we're looking into blockchain is our international business does a lot of work with bills of lading and other type of transactional documentation, and so that's being sponsored by third parties, but we're participating in that as well.
Any other questions? We're at that time, so thank you guys.